O vídeo a seguir não é indicado para quem é idiota e acredita na Terra plana.
Saudações siderais! Estamos começando mais uma edição de Conexão Sideral. Na verdade, o último episódio desta temporada do Conexão Sideral. E, claro, vocês podem até ficar tristes que está acabando, mas logo vem a próxima temporada. E em compensação, por ser o último episódio, é uma entrevista muito especial. Eu já fiz essa entrevista no fim do ano passado, mas guardei justamente para ser o último episódio, para fechar a temporada em grande estilo, porque hoje nós vamos receber aqui, conversar com o Neil deGrasse Tyson, astrônomo, diretor do planetário Hayden de Nova York, que ficou mais famoso ainda depois que apresentou a nova versão da série Cosmos, que originalmente havia sido apresentada pelo Carl Sagan. Durante a entrevista nós vamos falar de Cosmos, vamos falar da experiência dele no planetário Hayden, do lance todo do rebaixamento de Plutão, vamos falar desse movimento anti-ciência e vamos pautar boa parte da conversa por um livro que ele publicou aqui no Brasil no ano passado, que é o Morte no Buraco Negro. Esse livro aqui é realmente muito bacana, é uma coleção de ensaios do Neil deGrasse Tyson e a gente vai abordar vários dos temas que ele discutiu aqui neste livro. Mas só para você não perder a referência aí, no começo da entrevista, ele estava um pouquinho atrasado e eu contei para ele que enquanto eu estava esperando ele aparecer online, eu estava folheando justamente este livro dele aqui, A Viagem de Merlin pelo Universo, que foi o primeiro livro que o Neil deGrasse Tyson publicou. Eu já tenho ele há bastante tempo, ele foi editado no Brasil em 2001 e originalmente foi escrito pelo Neil em 1989 lá nos Estados Unidos. Então a gente comenta um pouquinho disso no começo da entrevista e depois parte para discutir o Morte no Buraco Negro. E como não existe uma coisa chamada Neil deGrasse Tyson demais, a editora Planeta acabou de lançar o mais novo livro dele aqui no Brasil, é o Astrofísica para Apressados. É outro livro muito bacana e olha, a capa é maravilhosa. Meu sonho um dia é fazer um livro que tem uma capa bonita igual essa. E o conteúdo também é muito legal, eu já li. Não vamos abordar isso na entrevista porque esse livro ainda não estava lançado quando eu gravei a entrevista. Mas de toda forma fica a dica para você, se você gosta do Neil deGrasse Tyson, se você tem interesse pelos livros dele. O Viagem do Merlin pelo Universo acho que você só vai achar em sebo a essa altura, mas o Morte no Buraco Negro, que foi publicado ano passado, e o Astrofísica para Apressados, você pode encontrar aí nas livrarias do Brasil todo, editado pela editora Planeta. Bom, sem mais delongas, Neil deGrasse Tyson.
All right, I can see you. Can you see me?
Yeah.
All right. We're good. You know, while you were coming, I was looking at a notebook of yours I have. It's Merlin's Tour of the Universe.
Oh,
so, you know, you can call me a cheerleader of your books because this goes way back, right?
Thank you. Is that one in Portuguese or is that in English?
It's in Portuguese. It's in Portuguese.
Wow.
Yeah.
So the sequel to that, I think, is a stronger book because I figured out how to develop the character more. And there are many more encounters with historical figures in it. So if you can find the sequel to that, which is just visiting this planet.
I'll look into it. But, but it was not published in Brazil, right?
I don't know. I don't know. I'd be disappointed if they published the first one and not the second one.
All right.
Yeah.
Well, but now we're talking about Death by Black Hole, right? Which is your new book here in Brazil. And it was published originally in 2007 in the US. And I was really impressed by the range of subjects in the book because, you know, you go from explaining how astronomy produces knowledge to how the public perceives, sometimes wrongly, science and scientists. And although the book goes from 2007, I think it's even more important now what it says because, you know, my impression, and I don't know if you agree with me, is that right now we have kind of an anti-science backlash movement that's going on. You know, things seem to go worse and worse every year. And I was wondering if you have an opinion on why is this happening in this age of so much information that we have this kind of anti-science movement. You know, like 20 years ago, I couldn't imagine an Earth flat movement gaining some tracking. So it's kind of crazy what's going on, right?
It just means I'm a failure. It means we're all failures. Or maybe what it means is it would be much, much worse if it weren't for people always fighting the fight. So in a free country, I don't really care what people think or what they believe. That's kind of what it means to live in a free country. What matters, and this is where important distinctions need to be made, there are several kinds of truths out there. One of them, let's just call it an objective truths. And objective truths are things that can be established regardless of who's doing the experiment. So it is the nature of reality. Then there are things a person might call personal truths. And this is if you believe Jesus is your savior, or if Mohammed could move a mountain, or you know, your personal truths are things that you hold dear, perhaps, and you know they're true in your soul, but in order to get someone else to agree with you, you have to either brainwash them or convert them by force. And personal truths don't always agree with one another as you go around the world. And so again, I have no problems with anyone's personal truth. But if you now rise to power and you want to create laws and legislation, and if you now base them on your personal truths, in a pluralistic society such as Brazil, multicultural, pluralistic, then that is the beginning of the end of a free society. It's the beginnings of a theocracy or any government that is dogmatically established. So it wouldn't have to be a theocracy. It could be, there's certain examples of sort of totalitarian dictatorship states, even some early communist states where the government established the truth and you had to ascribe by it. And so therefore freedom of speech was not a thing. And it didn't allow debate. It didn't allow new ideas to arrive. So people, if you want to think there's a flat earth, fine. But if you now become a leader and you start creating laws, that's a different kind of country. That's
that you feel that is what you feel. It's you know, the most problematic thing of people not getting science is that they tend to, you know, try to impose these kinds of views on others.
Right, and that's the end of a free society. That's correct. Because E equals MC squared is true whether or not you believe in it, right? I've said that, I'm quoted as saying this, that science is true whether or not you believe in it. And what I mean, of course, is once science establishes a truth, an objective truth, it's not subject to anybody's opinion. And in the book Death by Black Hole, in spite of the title, is all about how science works, how and why science works. And so I'm glad you noticed that the wide range of topics in there, because it's a celebration of curiosity and of discovery.
And you know, you kind of jokingly said that you were a failure. You know, scientists were failing at communicating science to the public, and that is exactly my next question to you. Do you feel that all this movement anti-science is in part, I know it's not all on you, but it's part on scientists, that they are not, you know, trying hard enough? Of course, you're a great voice communicating science, but maybe there's not enough of you, you know?
No, I think it's deeper than that. And I think if you look at what role science literacy can play in society. When people are scientifically literate, first they can make an informed decision about whether they want to become a scientist or not, because they know what science is. But if you choose to not become a scientist, yet you are still scientifically literate, you can become a scientifically literate artist, for example. And maybe you're the artist who makes the next wave of science fiction films. Artist with a capital A. So you could be a sculptor, painter, writer, movie producer, this sort of thing. Maybe your art is touched by that moving frontier of science. If you want to be an attorney, maybe you're the first one to decide or to think about the mining laws that you might have to write regarding the extraction of natural resources from asteroids. That's a frontier that could benefit from some legal thought. So if science literacy pervades society, then there's no chance anyone is going to vote for someone who thinks Earth is flat. They'd be viewed as, well, that's their own personal world, but they are unfit to lead the rest of us who have anchors in objectively true knowledge about the world. So I don't see it as the job of scientists to rid the world of anti-science sentiment. It's the job of us all to gain some minimum level of science literacy so that everyone can participate in, and everyone can pass judgment on what is scientific out there and what is not, and then lead the personal life that they want. But then you would know not to force it upon others.
I see. Well, one of the most fun parts of the book for me, it was when you mentioned the various ways the universe can and ultimately will kill us all. So yeah. Right now,
universe is a dangerous place.
Yeah. But right now, at this point in time, what do you feel is the larger existential risk to humanity? An asteroid, a supernova, or Donald Trump?
No. So one interesting element of the American system as prescribed in the Constitution is, and it may have come this way just out of resistance to kings, because there was a king of England who was also head of the church, and the founding fathers escaped that. And so they're not going to create another country that has kings and theocracies. So they created a society where the power, yes, the president has more power than any other branch, but he doesn't have ultimate power. He has more power, but not ultimate power. So if a president starts doing things that nobody likes, then the people who you have elected to Congress can resist that. The courts can judge that maybe what you said is unconstitutional. So if a president goes off the rails, then there's a limit to how far they can drift as a leader of the country. So for me, the issue is not what any one candidate's policies are. For me, the issue is the electorate informed enough to vote in their own interest, to vote, to understand the causes and effects of decisions that the person who they elect will make. So as an educator, my goal is to educate the public rather than to chase after politicians for whatever they might have said.
Yeah, of course, but you know, I put this as some kind of joke, but referring to one thing you didn't mention is that I feel like humans are the most dangerous things to humanity right now. You know, it's easier for us to destruct ourselves than a supernova or an asteroid, although if we wait long enough, we'll get that, right?
Yeah, so an implicit part of that chapter was that, yes, we are really good, particularly equipped with modern technology. Modern civilization is particularly well equipped at rendering ourselves extinct. So all of the list of dangers that come from space that I explored, they presume that we are wise enough to not kill ourselves, and so that we can use our brain power to protect us from cosmic threats rather than from threats that we bring onto ourselves.
And are you an optimist on this? You think we can handle? What is your personal take?
What, our own challenges?
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm borderline between a pessimist and a realist. So I like the recent data that showed that we are kinder to one another, in spite of what the media reports. We are kinder to one another today, on average, than we've ever been as a civilization. As an example, consider the 80 or so deaths that occurred in the south of France when a bus drove through a crowd, a terrorist act. That made headlines around the world for several days. But 70 years ago, is that right? 60? Yeah, 70 few years ago, we were fighting the Second World War. And if you run the numbers on that, what you'll find is from 1939 to 1945, 1,000 humans were killed per hour of every hour of that war. Yet that alone was not making headlines. There was just this larger thing, we're fighting a war, and it's the noble fight, good against evil, and our whole mindset was different. It's, we must do this for the better world, 1,000 people per hour. So now we live in a world where 80 people die in one incident, and it's headlines around the world. That is as good as evidence as you will ever find that we live in a more peaceful world. I know it sounds kind of backwards to even report it that way, but the fact that world news is reporting on single incidences around the world, single acts of violence around the world, and in total, the number of deaths is vanishingly small compared with what we were doing hourly during the Second World War. And so we may get the impression that we live in a particularly violent world. But compared with the world that our grandparents lived in, that's just not the case. So I have some optimism there that if this trend continues, maybe future news headlines will be, a cat got caught in a tree, and that makes world news because that doesn't happen. Or the nature and the scale of the deaths that get reported on become more and more obscure. And this is would be the continuing evidence that we are overall, on average, kinder to one another than we ever once were.
But on the other hand, we have the fact that technology is getting so powerful that you can make mistakes by accident and then cause a catastrophe. So
yeah, that's true. And I don't know that we are at higher risk today about a mistake making a catastrophe than we were during the Cold War, when there were weapons specifically conceived for that purpose. Whereas now there are weapons, fewer, I think, than back then, but no one is thinking we are going to annihilate the world with it. That's not even a thought. So I guess it could still happen by accident, but my fear of what could have happened by accident was much higher during the Cold War than anything that's going on today. So I guess in that sense I'm an optimist, but not a rampant optimist. I think we're doing better in spite of media reports. I think we are, we have the experiments of countries that decided to create laws based on dogma. We just need to remind people who want to create laws based on whatever is their holy book and have that affect everybody. By the way, you can create a country, I suppose, that is just your religion or just your dogmatic worldview, and then invite people who only have that view to come to your country. Suppose you could do that, but you won't be in a position to invent new ideas and to innovate, because innovation flows from the freedom of thought, not from the containment of thought that would go on when you have to ascribe to a pre-existing doctrine.
Yeah. One of the interesting parts of the book is where you mentioned that astrophysicists are almost always astonished at something, and media somehow thinks that's unusual, but it's actually the way things usually are. And these days, I think the most astonishing thing people have been reporting about is the so-called Tabby star. It's a star that Kepler has discovered, and it's blinking in an unusual way. And some people say that maybe that there are some aliens building something very big, akin to a Dyson sphere or something like that. Is this Lowell syndrome all over again? Are we seeing aliens everywhere?
No, Lowell believed he actually saw them. These ideas are hypotheses, untested hypotheses to explain some data. So I think what the public needs to recognize is most of everything a research scientist works on is unknown. There's unknown things all over the place. So only some unknowns make headlines. And when they do, people say, oh, not even scientists know what it is. And then what happens is there's this urge for people to come up with an extraordinary explanation for it. We don't know what it is, therefore they're aliens building, and it's a god, it's a spiritual energy. And it's like, well, let's look at the history of things we didn't understand in the past. Did the explanation turn out to be God or aliens or spirit energy or whatever? No, it didn't. So the history of this exercise is one where the most extraordinary explanation to account for what we don't know tends to be the least likely. And it's fun to speculate. Maybe it is aliens, but if I were a betting man, that's not where I'd put my money.
Yeah, sure.
I'd put my money on some cosmic phenomenon that we have yet to discover, that will soon be revealed to be a new kind of thing that goes on in the universe.
And that's exciting in its own right?
Yes, yes. We're stumped all the time, as you correctly reported.
Well, you know, I've seen your cameo in Batman versus Superman. And, you know, by the way, I think it's the best part of the movie.
Some people said that.
But, you know, I found it a bit odd because you have a kind of love-hate relationship with Hollywood, right? You're always criticizing movies for doing things that are not scientifically accurate. And then you are talking about a man who can fly against all laws of physics. What happened there?
So I think I'm misunderstood with regard to my criticisms of Hollywood. People view me, I think I come across as being harsh, unforgiving, and being a spoil sport or someone, or killjoy, there's probably an equivalent phrase in Portuguese, where you don't bring them along because they'll just ruin it for everyone. That apparently that's how I'm received by many people, but that's not my intent. My intent is to highlight things that happen in a movie that perhaps could have been improved had they known the actual science. And in that way, the viewer's experience with the movie can be deepened. You can say, oh, wow, so this could have been a better scene, but let's follow it through and see where they take it. But I'm being viewed as just someone who just ruins all movies. And so since that's not my intent, and I don't know how to convey the correct intent, I may just stop criticizing movies because people are not receiving them the way I had intended. So, you know, I give a whole lecture called An Astrophysicist Goes to the Movies. And they're movies I praise, they're movies I criticize, they're movies I just highlight because they were fun. They highlighted a fun thing about science, but then happened to get that wrong. So I applaud them for going there and then scold them for not making a couple of phone calls to get it perfect. So I view it as a sort of a playground of how to tell a story. And I'm happy to report that the author of the book The Martian, which became the Matt Damon film The Martian, he said when he was writing the book, he imagined that I was looking over his shoulder. What would Neil Tyson say about this sentence? No, I'd better fix that and make it even better. So,
and did you get it right?
I deeply respect what artists do whenever they reach for science to try to tell a story.
I see. Well, and I believe that because, you know, I saw a movie, a video the other day, you praising the Starship Enterprise. So I can't believe you actually like those things, and you know, your nitpicking is well meant.
Well, that's my point. The fact that you are surprised by hearing me say nice things about the Enterprise meant you were one of the people who assumed I was just anti-Hollywood. And so you're one of the people I did not correctly communicate my intent to.
But you know, when I was reading Death by Black Hole, I think I grasped at least why you were so enthused about Star Trek. Because, you know, there's a future where us humans are working with science and technology, you know, to solve problems and to discover the unknown. So that's the whole spirit, right? It's not, you know, a boy with a mystical force that uses a laser sword or something like that, right?
Right, right.
So you like Star Trek?
Star Trek, that's correct. Because there's some premise that it has anchors in real science and technology. Whereas in Star Wars, there's no such premise. They just make stuff up, and that is the world. So,
and it doesn't work. It doesn't work for you as a work of fiction, you know.
Well, it's work of fantasy for me. I'm not I would not call Star Wars science fiction. Maybe it's fantasy. I just wouldn't use the word science as applied to it.
I see. I see.
There is none.
I see. Yeah. Well, going back to science, I'd like to bring up the Pluto affair. Because, you know...
Don't get me started.
Yeah. I know your role in it. I remember reporting on your decision at the Hayden, you know, to remove Pluto from the planet list and present it. But, you know, at the time, it was something like, well, you know, there's some weird stuff going with Pluto. It isn't big enough to be a planet. It isn't small enough to be a comet. It's something in between, but it's not a bona fide planet. Since then, the IAU crafted, you know, a definition of planet. And my question to you is, are you happy with that definition, or you think we're going to revisit or down the line to, you know, to refine it and to have a better grasp of what a planet really is?
I think their decision is sensible, given what we know about objects in the solar system, because it was a three-tier thing. Is it large enough to be a sphere? Is it the primary object orbiting the sun? And that's in that way the moon could be large enough to be a sphere, but the moon would not be considered the planet because it's orbiting primarily Pluto, and Pluto is primarily orbiting the sun. So, and then the third criterion has to clear its orbit. And so I don't have a problem with that. However, I'm thinking what should have happened is we get rid of the word planet altogether because it's not useful anymore. If I say I found a planet orbiting another star, you have to play 20 questions with me. Is it big? Is it small? Is it rocky? Is it gaseous? Is it in the habitable zone? Might it have life? Is it, you know, how hot is it? Is it cold? Does it have moons? And I'm thinking we are in desperate need of a whole other vocabulary to describe the actual variation of objects that can orbit a star. The fact that our current nomenclature, the word planet, can describe Earth as well as Jupiter, tells me the word is no longer useful.
I see. So you think maybe we'll have to drop it and think of something else entirely different.
I think one day a clever clever system, wouldn't it be nice to know if in a single word you knew that a planet around another star was orbiting in the green zone, the Goldilocks zone of that planet? Wouldn't that be a great identifier for a planet in your vocabulary?
I see.
Think about the words we have just to describe water. So if we have a word to describe vaporized water that's floating above your head, well, that's a cloud. Well, suppose that vaporized water is now not over your head, but on the ground. We have a different word for that. It's called fog, right? Oh,
yep.
No, so what happens if the humidity in the air condenses out overnight and forms a bead of water on plants? We have a different word for that. It's called dew, but it's all water. So I think the lexicon for planets is underpowered, given the need that we have for it to serve our exploration.
I see. Well, you know, the 21st century seems to be filled with promises of new discoveries for astrophysics. You know, going from exoplanets to gravitational waves. I was wondering, what are you most excited about that apparently is going to happen, or we're going to be able to discover in the next few years? What excites you the most?
I would say not in the next few years, but in the next decade or two. I think we'll know for sure whether Mars ever had life. There's surely no life on the surface now because the very harmful ultraviolet rays from the sun are not shielded by any kind of ozone layer the way we have here. There's no free oxygen in the Martian atmosphere that would serve this role. So if there's life there today, it would be underground. I think in the next 20 years, we'll know if there's ever life on Mars and whether there's ever life, or even if there's life today, on Jupiter's moon Europa. So this would be a test of life thriving in our solar system, in our backyard, outside of Earth's surface. So would like to resolve once and for all the mysteries of dark matter and dark energy. Dark matter is the oldest unsolved problem in astrophysics. And dark energy, it's been around since 1998 as a measured phenomenon in need of an explanation. So I would like to know that in the next 20 years or so, we'd have all three of those solved.
I see. And well, do you feel we have a real chance, a real shot at you know, dark energy in the next 10 to 20 years? Do you feel we have it? Because it seems so, you know, mysterious right now that.
Yeah. And that's the fun part, and that's why it's attracting so many researchers. They want to be steeped in the ignorance that prevails anytime you think about and explore dark matter and dark energy.
I see. Well, you became a household name here in Brazil after the Cosmos TV series. And
wow, excellent.
Yeah, and
was I dubbed or was it subtitles?
Well, it had both. It had both, and it went to Netflix, and people could watch it. You know, and I confess the first episode brought a tear to my eye because, you know, you're talking about Carl Sagan and how you met him, and I was wondering, how did it feel to, you know, step onto Carl's shoes and do that show? Did you feel pressured?
No, because I never made the mistake of trying to step into his shoes, because they're his shoes. All I can do is step into my own shoes. And see, if I stepped into his shoes and failed, I would have failed trying to do what he did. Whereas if I step into my own shoes and fail, then I just messed up, because I can be what I am in my own shoes. And so that's how I looked at it. I already had a fair amount of life experience reaching the public, writing for them, being interviewed. So I felt as though I had very good foundation on which to ascend the mantle that he built for that series. So if I were to fail, I'd want to fail in my own shoes, not trying to occupy someone else's.
And clearly, over the show, you have your own voice. It's very different in style and approach than what Sagan did, but equally great.
Well, thank you. Thank you.
I'd like to know what the
By the way, I
process
still
was.
give you this interview, even if you didn't like it. Just so you know.
No, I can believe that. But I really liked it. It's I'm kind of space geek, so there's nothing that I couldn't like.
Okay.
And I was wondering about the process because the scripts, at least at the byline, they were written by Adrienne and Steven Soter, but it's clear it has your voice, all over the place, things that relate to you personally. So I was wondering, how was this process of scripting and coming up with the show?
So there were three of us at the very beginning. There was Adrienne, Steve Soter, two of the original three writers of the original Cosmos, by the way. The third was Carl Sagan. The three of us were there and thinking about scripts, and I began to realize that Adrienne and Steve Soter themselves are a writing pair. They're a pair. They've written together before. In fact, here at the Hayden Planetarium in New York City, they wrote the first two space shows of our newly built facility. So I realized that I was kind of like a third wheel of a bicycle, where I was not really necessary, and I could then focus on other things, like content and the science topics and this sort of thing. So Adrienne and Steve Soter became the writers of this series, but it still has to sound like it's coming from me. So they did a lot of homework, looking at my videos, looking at reading my writings, and so it's a blend of what I would have said, but left to myself, but deeply infused with the heart and humanity that Adrienne brings to the table, as well as the historical role that famous scientists have played in the past. Steve Soter is quite a fan of the history of science and what role they can play in storytelling. And that accounts for why you have so many of the historical bits. I think one for every episode, actually.
And to prove that I really liked it, I want to know if there's any chance of a second season.
Yeah. So we're still in conversation. There's a lot on everybody's plate right now. If they want to get a different host, I don't have a problem with that. Then it would be, the tradition would then be every Cosmos has a new host, kind of like in Doctor Who. You reincarnate. It's the reincarnation of some meta soul of a skeptic scientist. So, but so there is talk about a season 2, but nothing is greenlit yet.
I see. Well, I'm hopeful it's going to happen, and I'm hopeful you'll be on it because you're great, really.
Well, thank you. I appreciate that.
You end Death by Black Hole in a kind of controversial theme that is the conflict between science and religion, and it's something that you talk a lot in other venues as well. And at one point you say, quote, "Let there be no doubt that as they are currently practiced, there is no common ground between science and religion." What?
There's no question about it. It's nothing could be truer said than that sentence.
Yeah.
Correct.
What I find interesting is that you say, as they are currently practiced. I was wondering if this is a fundamental, unavoidable clash, or is it something that possibly in a future where, things get better accommodated and religion recognizes its role and science recognizes its own role and their boundaries, they could, live together? Or you think this clash is always be there?
Oh, wait. So there are two different things going on in that one question. So you can ask, what is the likelihood, what is the receptivity that religion has to science? And some religions are more receptive to science than others. So is that a harmony between science and religion? I guess so. But what it means is that the religion is acquiescing to the discoveries of science. And if you want to call that harmony, then sure. And what I was referring to as they are currently practiced, read that sentence again just to get it precise.
Well, you said, let there be no doubt that as they are currently practiced, there is no common ground between science and religion.
Yeah, common ground, exactly. So common ground implies that religion brings something to the table, science brings something to the table, and then we have a new understanding of the world from that merger. And that's what common ground is. But if you are a religion and you are just taking the science discoveries, that's not common ground. That's religion acquiescing to what science has discovered.
Yeah, but let me ask you.
That's all I'm saying. That's all I mean by that. There's no. If you're a religion that agrees with everything science does, is that common ground? No, that's kind of, all right, we give up. It'll be the science will be the truth, not what my holy book says.
Yeah, but you know, I feel that there's the other way around.
In your religion, you might want to fight it. In your religion, you might want to fight that, as many do. But if you don't fight it, and you embrace it and accept it, I would still be hesitant to call that common ground, because it's not in common. It's a one direction. It's like science influencing religion, not religion influencing science.
I see. I agree completely with that, but I think that may be the other way around as well, because, you know, some scientists, not many of them, but some scientists and some skeptics use the fact that we can understand the natural world as a justification to say there is no God or no, you know, religious instance. And that's not true, right? Because God is not a hypothesis that you can test. So science also has to realize and accept that that is a subject it can't address, right?
No, it's not true. That's not true.
You think it's not true?
Oh, yeah, it's not true.
Science can prove there is no God?
No, science can test whether there is a God based on statements you make about your God. So science doesn't prove anything ever. So you'll never hear a scientist, generally you will not hear scientists using the word proof. It's not what we do. What we do is we have an idea and we test it. And if the idea survives the test, then, and we provide other kinds of tests, get other people to verify it, then we establish a new truth about the world based on this series of tests that have been conducted. And then we move on to the next question. And if enough of these come together into a larger, deeper understanding, then we have a theory. It's a theory of evolution, the theory of gravity, it's quantum theory. A theory is a deep understanding of what we know goes on in the universe, plus provides a foundation for what we predict will be true in the universe. And so now, here's how it would work. You would say, I believe in God. I said, fine. If God exists, how would that manifest in this world? And you would say, oh, people who pray will get their prayers answered. Okay? Or people who are sick and have other people pray for them, they'll be more likely to get better. Or people who, you can come up with testable phenomenon that, according to you, if your God exists, should be testable.
But if I say, if my premise is, you know, I believe in God and I think he can manifest himself whenever he chooses, and we can't predict when this is going to happen. How do you test for that?
Okay, so I would ask you, when has God manifested in the past? I would just ask you. If you said you can't predict the future, surely you can identify God in the past.
No, so I don't have to, because it's a matter of faith for me. You know, I'm playing the religious guy over here. I'm not religious, you know, but I'm playing devil's advocate.
So I got you. No, you're playing God's advocate.
all right. That's okay. That's true.
So No, that's not the question. You're saying God can manifest himself at any time, at any place, but you cannot predict it. Fine. But that would mean that sometime in the past, God has manifested himself.
Yes,
So
but if
I would
it's
just
not...
want a list of when those times occurred. And if God only manifested himself to you, then that is a personal truth, and I have nothing I can say about that.
Yeah, and that's true. That's what I think.
Different,
it's that religion is personal, strictly personal,
Well,
and
however,
you can't. But you know.
People, wait. Most people who are monotheistic would assert that God operates everywhere and can have an impact on everyone, and they're taking God out of themselves and making assertions for others. In Islam, there are people who are asserting that they are doing God's will, whatever it is they're doing to other people. In Christianity, they want to convert you because apparently God can't do it himself, so they have to do it. So what I'm saying is that if you have to be the intercessor for God, then you're not in a position to point to me what God has done. And so all I'm saying is, if your God has certain powers, and you are sure those powers manifest in this world, all you need to do is point that out to me. And then we can test it. This is how I can explore whether your God is real. That's how you can do it. Now, if you want to say, well, God is just inside me and is not anywhere else, that's fine. I can't test that. Well, I can sort of test it. I can test your neurosynapses in your brain and see what parts fire. And we can find out that happens to be the belief center, the religion center. And these are things that people believe without any evidence. And that includes people who are sure that there are fairies, and who are sure that there are leprechauns, and who are sure that there are 1,000 other things that people have believed, and it all happens in the same center of your brain, and so therefore you cannot assert the uniqueness of what you believe coming out of that center of your brain relative to anybody else who has other things that they believe without evidence.
But you can use this center to believe things that are real as well. So it's not really any test, right?
I don't have these data yet. We don't have the data yet.
Yeah.
Explore what's going on in that part of your brain. But you can imagine, this is not hard to imagine, that there's a part of the brain that is the belief center. And there could be a future of experiments conducted there that shows that that's where people believe things without evidence. And then you go through the history of civilization, and there's 1,000 different things people believe, and it's all centered there, which gives very low evidence for your God being real relative to someone else's leprechauns.
I see. So you ultimately believe that science can test for God and can test for beliefs that are not based on science.
If your beliefs have consequences in the physical universe, yes, we can test those. That's what science is. That's how it got invented. That's all it is. So if your God has no testable consequences in the physical universe, then I would ask, what is the role of God for you? Well, then you'd say it's deeply spiritual and personal. And then I'd say, okay, fine. And I go out about trying to discover how the universe works.
All right. Well, to round up this conversation, this very pleasing conversation, a cornerstone of astronomical and scientific thought in the last few centuries, and you talk about this in the book as well, is the so-called Copernican principle. Basically, the idea that we don't occupy a special place in the whole of the universe. And some people, understandably perhaps, get upset by this fact, and it's a fact, because it seems that because of that they are small and irrelevant. But I don't feel that should be the case, and I was wondering if you think the same. After all, isn't it amazing that an ordinary animal species in an ordinary planet around an ordinary star in an ordinary galaxy has the ability to understand the complex, giant, wondrous universe around us.
Yeah.
Isn't that something amazing and great by itself?
I can't agree with you more. A. B. The people who are saddened or upset by this revelation, I think they entered the question with an unjustifiably too high ego to begin with. If you went in with no ego and then heard this information, an alternative way you might think about it is, oh my gosh, we're made of atoms that you can find across the universe. We have protein molecules that and DNA that is found in every life form on Earth. Oh my gosh, we are connected to the cosmos. We are one with the cosmos in ways that give me deep meaning and significance to the universe. That's another way to look at that very same information. But it doesn't involve the attack of your ego. You go into it with no ego at all, and you come out enlightened, if not enchanted.
Yeah, that's so great. That's how I feel exactly. and I thank you very much for taking your time to talking to me. It's been a pleasure.
Well, good luck with the piece, however you put it together and put it out there.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Okay, take care. Bye.
Bom, essa foi a entrevista com o Neil, espero que vocês tenham gostado. Para mim foi um prazer enorme conversar com ele, realmente um sujeito com uma clareza de pensamento que impressiona. E vocês vejam que presciente em algumas coisas. Naquela época o Trump ainda não estava eleito, mas a gente discute a questão do Trump, ele discute os freios e contrapesos da democracia americana, que a gente está vendo em ação agora, ele já estava antecipando lá, e tem vários temas interessantes e que estão ainda bastante atuais, e que mostram justamente o insight que ele tem, não só sobre ciência, mas sobre a percepção que as pessoas têm do mundo e de como a ciência pode colaborar para a gente melhorar a nossa percepção, a nossa autopercepção, né, do ser humano e do mundo que nos cerca. Espero que vocês tenham gostado da entrevista. O Conexão Sideral, a primeira temporada termina aqui, mas claro, deixa aí nos seus comentários dicas de gente que você gostaria de ver entrevistada aqui e tal, porque a gente vai voltar com a segunda temporada em algum tempo ainda não previsto. Mas se você tiver comentários, críticas, elogios a fazer, aproveite aí o espaço de comentários, que eu vou olhar com muito carinho para a gente pensar a próxima temporada do Conexão Sideral. Fui!